So thank you very much for still being here after the week. I really hope that you enjoyed the conference, that you enjoyed the new formats, and that you created your own unique eye experience with all the building blocks. So let me go there. So as you know, we had a number of awards of papers, but apart from that, we have special recognitions in the program. And these recognitions, they are for the student research competition, the interactive demos, and the special recognition for sustainability. So I'm going to start with the student research competition. As you know, this is a competition of ACM. So basically, there are 3 ranked winners. And the first one will go to the ACM competition. So we can maybe say the name. We make. Thank you. So I'm going to start for the graduate one. And the winner is Obina Obinya Otu.
Yeah, now you're good. Woo! Obina.
The second one is Nidhi Mittal. You can applaud as well. They all deserve it. And the third one is Joris Bosma. Now in the category of undergraduate, the winners are Victor Emil Caldova, Joseph Prickerman, Nicholas Rieger, Thomas Wolf. Second one is Hajun Do. And the third one is Jonathan Tusa and Andy Heredia. Congratulations to all the winners. And as I said, this is an ACM official competition, so the winner will go to the grand finale of ACM.
Wow. All right. Before I reveal that, let's go back. So I'm now going to announce regarding the winners and special recognitions for the interactive demos. If you saw in the first slide that Pablo shown, this was an extremely exciting and competitive year to get your demos here at CHI, and I want to thank also all our demo presenters. They're all winners to bringing their demos here, but also, you know, the general chairs, everyone for making it possible for them to have their demos here. So we have several categories in the recognitions for demos, and I want us to get some excitement going here. And the first one goes to jury honorable mention. I'm going to read them all out, and then you applaud all these 3 folks at the end, okay? So for the first demo that received the jury, so the jury walks around these demos. These are people who know a lot about demos. They've seen hundreds of CHI demos, and they judge it very harshly and very seriously, and then they award a bunch of these awards. The first one is Memo Maker, Creator, Curator, or Something Else, Exploring Human AI Mnemonic Co-Creation. The second one is Projection on Dynamic Columns Controlled with Ultrasonic Streaming. And the third one is Demonstrating X-Spine, Integration Motion Sensing Capability into Dynamic Structures using Multi-Material FDM 3D Printing. All right, those were the honorable mentions, but the jury was impressed with even more other demos. So let's see who takes on the big awards. All right, the jury best demo is Unitless Measurements with StoryStick++, Rethinking Measurement as Interactive Processes. A huge hand of applause for the authors on the screen. Now, in the interactive demos, we do send the juries for all the booths and test out all these demos and make their hard deliberations. But you also, all of you, are collectively a jury in a way, with your ability to vote for the different demos as you've tried them out throughout the week, but also especially on the Monday's demo reception. So the next set of awards that I'm announcing here on behalf of my TPC colleagues is for the for the people's vote for the demos. Again, we have 2 categories. So let's create some tension here. All right, so what do we got here? We have popular choice, honorable mention. So this is the votes for the people. The first demo is demonstrating Gaussian Nexus room scale real-time interactive AR/VR telepresence with Gaussian splatting. The second one is co-ideation across time, revitalizing legacy design sketch notes with conversational AI agents to foster intergenerational collaboration. And the third one is The Wizard of Taste, demonstrating multisensory eating with electrical taste and bone conduction auditory seasoning. And last, but definitely not least in the interactive demos category, is the demo that has received the most votes from all of you at CHI 2026 in Barcelona. And that is this one. Slide.bingo, from passive attendance to active listening through AI-generated bingo. Congratulations to the authors, who apparently all of you know already, so that's great. Apparently you guys did a fantastic demo. All right, Eloisa.
Hello, Kai. So I'm going to show now the special recognitions for sustainability. So we had two categories. The first one is sustainable impact, potential for sustainable impact. And the winner is Framing Water, exploring tensions between social norms and environmental sustainability through a data physicalization game. Let's congratulate the authors. Yeah. For the runner-up, we have 3D printing soap, exploring new biodegradable materials and creativity possibilities. And for the category research practices, we have the winner, Case Compass, designing sustainable community-led social technical systems for gender-based violence support work. And for the runner-up winners, we have Turnstile, a framework for analyzing human conversational behaviors to predict success in LLMs-assisted tasks. Congratulations. Congratulations to all the winners, and now I would like to welcome our keynote chair, Marta, to come to the stage. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We have such a special keynote. As we were preparing the keynotes, both the opening and the closing keynote, we were very much focusing on the theme that we had this year. And the theme of this year is building the future together. So it's that together that we really focus for this keynote, for this closing keynote. So we're going to have another amazing keynote by Professor Tamar Makin and Danny Claude. Professor Makin is at the Cognitive Neuroscience Lab at the University of Cambridge, and she's passionate about the link between the brain and the body. Her career has been in that space, both the brain and the body, and she has had several fellowships over her career. And Danny Claude is an award-winning designer that is also working in the same lab. We are very excited to hear about their collaboration that has been going on for many years. And we're very excited that this is the first time that they give this talk for us here at CHI. Please help me welcome both Danny and Tamar.
Yeah, looking? Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for this warm welcome to our very first CHI. This is a really special lecture for me personally. As Marta mentioned, Dani and I have been collaborating for many years together, and for the past decade, she has been a beacon of inspiration and thoughtfulness, guiding my own thinking and research. And it feels really special and amazing for me to be able to show this to you, demonstrate today by this shared presentation. So with that in mind, let's get started. You're all used to seeing these bionic limbs that look as if a human and a robot had had a baby. And the question we'd like to explore with you today is, when designing for our future body, is it really important for us to pay attention to the human form in terms of morphology, control, interfaces, or could we consider alternative designs that have nothing to do with the human body, but may afford really interesting functionality nevertheless? And you might be wondering why it takes two of us to answer this question. Well, what we've learned through our long-term collaboration is that each of us tends to make these assumptions that are really deeply rooted in our disciplines, and they are so embedded, so implicit, that we don't even bother to articulate them to each other. And what we've noticed is that by fleshing out these assumptions that we each make, we end up being able to really examine empirically whether these assumptions are real roadblocks in our path towards innovation. And this is what we wanted to share with you today. So we'll be exploring three main assumptions. The first being that if we design technology that is closer to the human form, this is going to be better for the human brain. The second assumption is that there is a normal or average body that we should be thinking about when developing our designs. And the third one is that if we're designing for the body, we don't have to worry too much about what it does to the brain. Let's start with the first assumption. Closer to the body is better to the brain. Well, maybe a pre-assumption that we've learned we're making, which is when we talk about the brain, Dani tends to think about this mushy, pink organ that is very different from my conceptualization of the brain, especially the body in the brain. I tend to think about this cartoon. This is a very famous cartoon created by Penfield back in the 50s, demonstrating how the body is represented in the brain, where we know that in the input and output parts of the brain to the body, these are primary somatosensory and motor cortex, we have this laid out template of the body in the brain. And the hand in particular benefits from some amazing neural real estate. It is bang in the middle of this strip. It is really well connected to other brain areas, and we think that it is this neural infrastructure that gives us hand dexterity that is so important to us as humans. Now, the assumption, again, I think implicit assumption that people make is that if we want to best benefit from this neural infrastructure, we better design something very close to the human body. And the assumption is that if we can plug into these neural resources, that would give us access to knowledge generated over hundreds of millions of years of evolution and through our own early life experience and development to create these really seamless and intuitive interfaces between the body, the brain, and the technology. Now, one challenge to this assumption that I like to call technological embodiment, this idea that if we can develop technology that is accepted by the brain as if it was a human body part, is coming from traditional neuroscience, where it has been reported that if we lose a part of input to this body map, let's say following amputation, this would trigger a process that we call reorganization or remapping, where the cortical neighbors would take over the freed up cortical territory. Now, if your hand area now becomes your face area, how are you going to plug in your artificial limb? So we wanted to explore this phenomena, and we were taking advantage of this interesting phenomena called phantom sensations, which is people with amputations tell us that they can still feel the hand that is no longer there. They know it is missing, but they can still feel it. This is very famous for being painful, phantom limb pain, but it doesn't have to be. We're just talking about like the sense that the hand is still there. And let me show you what happens in the brain when we ask amputees to move their phantom hand. So here you can see the amputee moving his intact hand in the scanner, and this is just to show you how normal hand representation looks like in the brain. Now we're going to ask him to move his phantom hand, so not much is happening down in the scanner video. But when you look at his brain, you can see this very stereotypical activity that is canonical to hand representation. So we know there's something in the brain that is persistent relating to the hand following amputation. And we had an amazing opportunity recently to try and understand how much of that hand representation is preserved following amputation by working with these 3 ladies that you see here. All 3 ladies were scheduled for an amputation for life-saving purposes, and they were kind enough and gracious enough to let us scan them before the amputation and after the amputation, so we can compare their body and hand representation before amputation to body and phantom hand following amputation. So before the amputation, we're asking each of them to move their hand that is about to be amputated. We would scan each of them twice before the amputation just to make sure we have really good baseline. And in red here, you see the areas that are activated when they're moving their hand, and in blue, the areas that are activated by the lips. Here are the 3 participants. You're looking at different hemispheres because they had to have a different hand removed. The interesting question is what's going to happen following amputation. And if the hand representation is wiped out or disappeared when they're moving their phantom hand, we're going to see less activity in red. And if the lip activity invades the territory of the missing hand, we would want to see the blue representation expanding into the hand area. But that's not what we see. So here we're seeing scans at 3 months post-amputation, 6 months post-amputation, 1.5 and 5 years. And as you can see, the activity of the hand is very stable. So is the activity for the lips. And this tells us that there is very stable representation both of the hand and the body following amputation that we can potentially take advantage of. So with that in mind, I'm going to run a little quiz with you, so pay attention. I'm going to introduce you to 2 scenarios of ladies that are now prosthesis users. Let's assume they're both now in their 30s. The first lady was born, First lady was born with 2 hands. She was amputated, let's say, in her early 20s and has been using successfully an artificial limb ever since. The second lady was born with a congenital upper limb difference, so she was born with a missing hand. She was fitted with an artificial limb as a toddler, let's say at the age of 3, and she's been using successfully her prosthesis ever since. She's also now in her 30s. Now, please raise your hand if you think that the first case study, the acquired amputee, is going to be a better prosthesis user as an adult. Okay, and raise your hand if you think that the second case study, the individual with congenital upper limb difference, is going to be a better prosthesis user. Okay, so you guys, you're thinking like neuroscientists. I'm not sure it's a compliment. So there was a very clear majority in the room for the congenital one-hander. And the neuroscience behind tells us that if you lost your hand, or if you're missing your hand and learning to adopt a prosthesis early in life, you can take advantage of this amazing power called brain plasticity, right? The brain is more plastic and pick up more skill, makes us more amenable to learning and change. But if you were paying attention to this little theory that we call embodied technology, you would say, but we need to first develop the neural resources of the hand to take best care of the artificial limb. So let's put this to the test. It's a very simple study. Participants are invited to the lab and they have to move these, not good at this. Move this manipulandum arm to visual targets in the workspace, either with their intact hand or with their prosthesis. And all we measure here is absolute error, how far you are in your endpoint from where you were supposed to point. So here you see control participants moving their dominant hand versus non-dominant hand, and amputees using their intact hand versus prosthesis. And I hope you appreciate that the 2 groups perform very similarly. So amputees use their prosthetics as well as we would use our non-dominant hand. What about congenital one-handers? So they show greater errors, certainly relative to the intact hand, but also relative to the prosthetics in amputees, telling us that having a hand and losing it provides us a better infrastructure for operating an artificial limb as an adult. Does that mean the brain needs to represent the prosthesis like it was a biological hand? To answer this question, we're going to take a detour in the brain to the back of the brain, occipitotemporal cortex, where we know there are areas that are also selective to hands, but these areas respond to visual features of hands. So we can very easily pinpoint these areas by showing people images of upper limbs as opposed to other body part and object categories. And what we want to see is how similar is the activity pattern when we show in pictures of hands compared to pictures of artificial limbs. We're also relative to tools. And for artificial limbs, we have two types of prosthetics here. We have the cosmetic prosthetic that is specifically designed to mimic the aesthetics of the hand. And we have the functional prosthetics that in our cohort was very dominated by these hook-like devices that don't look like hands at all. So first we're going to see results from control participants, and we're asking how similar is the representation in the brain across these categories. And our control participants, they were family members, friends, people who work with prosthetics, very used to seeing prosthetics. And the shorter the branch here, the more similar the representation across categories. And for controls, as you can see here, the cosmetic prosthetics are represented very similarly to hands, whereas the functional prosthetics are quite distinct from hands and instead represented a lot more like tools. What about people that actually use prosthetics in daily life? Here we have an average of 32 individuals with a missing limb. And on average, we find that neither the cosmetic nor the functional prosthesis is represented anything like a hand. And it's not really represented like a tool. Instead, we see this emerging categorical representation of artificial limbs as its own distinct, unique category that is shifted from the original representation of a hand or a tool. And the reason I wanted to share this result with you is because I think it shows that even though we are relying on hand resources in the brain, these are the hand selective areas, it doesn't mean that we need to perfectly mimic the representation of the biological body. And this is because we have brain plasticity mechanisms at play that would kind of figure out the best representation for these technologies that is distinct from a biological body. And I think this gives us permission or license, if you will, to start thinking outside the biomimetic toolbox. We don't have to stay so close to the human form in order to benefit from these brain resources. And this is a perfect segue to Danny's amazing work.
Hi. It's okay, you don't need to clap every time we change. We changed a couple of times. Hi, thank you, Tamar. Right, so I'm going to pick up on our second assumption, which is that there is a normal body to design for. And this shows up everywhere, in design and engineering, in how we define users, how we measure usability, or wearability, or what we consider a good interactional interface. We design for an average, a default user, but bodies don't work like that. They vary in shape, size, ability, experience, and when we design for normal, we exclude almost everything else. So, when we think about designing for the future body, prosthetics are a really useful place to start because they're a really unique kind of object. They kind of sit somewhere between a body part, a tool, and experience. And they're not just worn, they're lived in. And they're not just technical products, they're relationships between a body and a device, handcraft and technology, and also between how someone feels and how they're seen. And those relationships are complex, and that complexity gives us this incredible framework to learn from when designing the future body, or designing for the body in general. So this is Kelly Knox. She's a model, an activist, and she was born with one hand. And she actually doesn't wear a prosthetic in her daily life. She had a challenging relationship with them in the past, being told to wear an arm to fit in when she already felt like her whole self. So when we worked together, along with Sophie from the Alternative Limb Project, the goal wasn't function as we normally define it. It was about designing for connection. This was the first piece we made together, and we called it Synchronized, the synchronized arm, and it beat in time with Kelly's heart. We created it to explore this emotional connection between a person and their prosthetic, as well as flip the usual order of focus of a prosthetic. The socket that's usually designed to conceal is electroplated gold to celebrate the shape of Kelly's arm, highlighting what's normally hidden. From there, layered clear acrylic pieces form a one-to-one mirrored recreation of Kelly's right arm, and when it's activated with her thumb, a mechanism in the wrist ticks in time with her heart, and continues to tick when she's not wearing it, creating this lasting connection when there's no longer a physical one. The materialized arm challenged the aesthetic and material limits of what a prosthetic can be. It's made of over 20 different materials, ranging from wood, cork, bronze, pumice, resin, some polished, some raw, all different. One half is realistic silicone skin, sculpted to resemble her own arm. The other side is modular, textured, tactile, and also interchangeable, not just for visual expression, but also for weight and feel as well. Kelly said, and I quote, "I felt like it was part of me, not separate," which was totally unexpected. And that's very amazing to hear, because we interact with a world full of incredible materials every day. Clothing, furniture, tools, jewelry, but prosthetics are often stuck in medical beige. Why should a prosthetic feel less personal? Why should it offer fewer choices than the things and objects we get to wear without thinking? This is the Vine arm, which you saw earlier from Tamar's slides. And this was about physical expression, a reimagining of what a limb could even be. It's made of 26 articulated vertebrae, driven by motors and controlled wirelessly through pressure sensors in Kelly's shoes. It's a kind of botanical hybrid, a kind of mix of flora and fauna. And the form was mapped and actually extended from the end of Kelly's own arm. It's flexible, organic, asymmetrical like Kelly, and we moved away from symmetry in favoring movement and performance instead. The aim here was not to replace or restore, but to reimagine what a body could become. And then we made Vine 2.0. It had a slightly different vibe, obviously. So a new version, different aesthetic, different kind of presence. This time we kept the vertebrae exposed, which I was grateful for because it took me ages. We wanted the movement to be visible, each segment articulating, pushing the form a little bit further into something that felt other. It shares the same underlying structure as the first Vine, but here we leaned heavily into experimentation, 3D printed components, responsive materials, playing with light and reflection. We wanted it to move and be unapologetically expressive. And also change the way Kelly moved. Her body adapting to the Vine as much as the Vine responded to her. It became this new interaction, blurring the boundary between body and object. Working with Kelly changed the way I thought about prosthetics. She didn't suffer a loss, she was born her whole self. So when we added something to her body, it wasn't a prosthesis. It was an extension, an augmentation. And there's also something we don't see, it's her brain. As Tamar mentioned, like many people born with one hand, she doesn't have a left-hand area of her brain like I would have. That space has been repurposed for other parts of her body. So when we design for this space on her, at the end of her arm, we're not replacing something, we're extending her. And that shift away from restoring the expected to expanding what's possible is what brought me into augmentation. This is the third thumb. I'm wearing mine. The third thumb is a 3D printed flexible robotic thumb that you wear on your hand. I designed the first version during my master's degree at the Royal College of Art in London. It's wirelessly controlled by your big toes, one toe per movement, giving it 2 degrees of freedom with smooth proportional control. Because of the 3D printed flexible materials and the motor system, it moves in a very kind of natural thumb-like way. That was one of my kind of main goals of it. It's also surprisingly intuitive. Most people can use it within a minute. We've tested that across hundreds of participants, which I'll show you shortly. They use it to hold objects, manipulate tools, also explore extending themselves. People seem to quite like it and quickly make it their own. Tasks that usually require 2 hands can now perhaps be done with 1. And importantly, it's not designed for one type of hand. It's designed to extend many different hands, and I've met quite a few. The design is inspired by the body, not by how it looks, but how it works. We can't recreate the body in bone, muscle, skin, and tissue yet, but what we can do is study its function and design with the materials that we do have. And sometimes the outcome can actually be more interesting. This approach of designing from function, adaptation, and connection, not imitation, is how we can rethink human capability. So as I touched on earlier with Kelly, I get asked a lot, is the third thumb a prosthetic or is it augmentation? And I always say it's both, or really, even better, it's up to the wearer. Anyone can use it, as long as they have a part of their hand, sometimes even a wrist, a part of an arm, and 2 toes to control it, but even that can be changed. We're already exploring some other control methods like EMG and LiDAR. There's a common perception that a prosthetic replaces something that's missing, that it fills a gap, that it fixes a loss. But that idea first assumes someone has lost something, and that's not always true. Even when there is loss, a prosthetic doesn't necessarily restore what was once there. It helps someone to function in a world that was definitely designed around having 2 hands. A prosthetic doesn't fix someone, and it doesn't replace what's missing. It extends their ability, hopefully on their terms. This is Stephen. He was born with syndactyly on his right hand. So this is the same person wearing the same device. On one hand, it could be called a prosthetic. On the other hand, an augmentation. So it's not even really about the technology. It's our perspective of the human body. So I'm going to take a step back here to talk about augmentation and what I mean by augmentation. So like many emerging technologies, the language hasn't quite caught up yet. We don't have clear definitions, and the boundaries are still really shifting. So I'm just going to share a really simple framework based on some research that just to kind of give us a shared starting point. So augmentation can mean a lot of different things. It might extend the body, the senses, or the mind. And it can be achieved in different ways: mechanical, digital, biological, or even chemical. But today I'm going to focus on one part of that space: physical, mechanical, or technological wearable augmentation. So what it means to extend the physical body with technology. So what we call technology often depends on why it exists, how it's used, or who's using it. But beyond that, we can look at its relationship with the body. What does it give? What does it take away? And what does it ask from the body? And this is where the distinction becomes important between a tool and augmentation, because I also often get asked, isn't the third thumb just another hand tool? What is a tool? A tool is designed to substitute. It gives you function, but it also usually takes something away. For example, a shovel replaces digging with your hands very well, but it requires your arms, your hands, and your full attention. It's powerful, but it occupies the body. Augmentation tries to do something different. It aims to give without taking away, add without interruption, and enhance the way we move, sense, or perceive, or interact. For example, the third thumb doesn't occupy my hand. It supports it. Tools substitute, augmentation extends. So what are some of the aims of physical augmentation? Well, again, it's broad and still very evolving field, but we tend to see kind of a few key directions. So there's medical support, helping people recover or adapt; injury prevention, reducing strain and extending working life; dexterity, extending what the body can do, especially with the hands and upper limbs; performance, enhancing strength, speed, or endurance; and there's also directions inspired by the natural world, like biomimicry, creating new forms of movement, and also exploring environments that the body can't normally access. And of course, there's whatever comes next as well. The space is constantly evolving, driven by new materials, interfaces, and control systems. So getting back to the third thumb. So when you design to extend everybody, it needs to work with every body. So to put that to the test, at the Royal Society Summer Science Exhibition in London, almost 600 people tried the third thumb over 5 days. Our age range was 4 to 96. There was no pre-training, just curiosity, and 98% of participants could complete a task within 1 minute. And this wasn't just about testing usability. It showed that wearable technology can be intuitive, accessible, and inclusive from the start. Inclusion shouldn't be a retrofit, it should be built into the foundation of the design. Because if your new technology only works for some people, then you're only designing for their future. So we've also started working with kids with upper limb differences using the third thumb. And alongside doing research testing with them, we're running design sessions with them as well, exploring how they use the third thumb on different sides, in different positions, different angles, what they would change, colors, materials, and the insight has been fantastic. And what's interesting is that they also don't see it as replacing something they're missing. They see it as something new, a new way to move, to interact, to explore what they can do, and sometimes to ease the interactions that they struggle with. The goal here is to explore building augmentation alternatives to traditional assistive devices. In many cases with these kids, a traditional prosthetic hand wouldn't be practical at all, or even fit, and even if they did wear one, it would cover up a really functional part of their arm. For most of the kids I've worked with, this is the first robotic device they've ever used. The third thumb lets them kind of extend what they're already working with, quickly and with very little training. So the goal here isn't to replace, it's to offer another option, something more adaptable, more collaborative, and designed with them from the start. So moving on to control. Traditional prosthetics often use myoelectric control, so reading muscle signals from the body, and it can work really well. But it requires very precise activation, which is kind of harder to learn and effortful to maintain. Users often train daily just to kind of keep basic control. So people often ask me, why not control the third thumb with muscle sensors on the arm or even directly from the brain? The assumption being that the closer you are to the brain, the better the control. So we tested it. Here, the same participant is doing the same task on the left with toe control, with a pressure sensor, and then the other with EMG on the leg. So importantly, the movement they're doing is the same in both cases, just a different kind of sensor. So with the toe, the signal is smooth and proportional. You press more, the thumb moves more. With EMG, the signal tended to be quite noisy and inconsistent. And also to get enough input, you had to really tense the muscle, and you lose that kind of fine control. So in practice, people performed better with a pressure sensor. Sometimes the more intuitive interface wins. And then we tried something different. Instead of taking the signal from the body, we took it from the environment. This is the LiDAR thumb, some very, very new work coming out of the lab. A LiDAR uses light to measure distance. It sends out pulses of light and measures how long they take to bounce back. It's called time of flight technology. So the thumb is constantly aware of how close it is to the nearby objects. Here we have a spinal cord injury patient with very limited hand control. He's using it to pick up a ball. When he's ready to act, he signals with his left hand. From that moment, the thumb guides itself onto the object with 2 degrees of freedom and closes around it. So he decides when to act, and the system helps with how. So the control becomes shared between human intention and system support, exploring the idea that we don't have to replicate the body to create effective interaction. So everything I've shown so far is based on short-term use, minutes or hours. But the real question is what happens over time? What happens when people live with this technology for days or a week, when the body adapts and the brain adapts with it? And to answer that, I'm going to hand you back to Tamar.
So as Dani mentioned, we have a qualitative difference between what it's like to use technology for restoration compared to augmentation. With restoration, when we think about the brain challenge, we're thinking about how do we take a brain area and repurpose it to best suit the technology. But when we're thinking about augmentation, the question becomes, how do we add and extend the body representation? How do we grow a representation of a body part we've never had before and we were not designed to have from an evolutionary perspective? And we have to do all of that while bearing in mind that the brain is already fully occupied by the biological body. To address these questions, we train participants to use the thumb over hours, days, and sometimes weeks in order to train them to incorporate the thumb into their daily motor repertoire. Which brings us to the final assumption, which is if we're designing for the body, we're designing for the body, we don't have to think about the brain. Here is one of the tasks we like to use in the lab. It's my personal favorite. It's a coordination task. And Dani, do you mind demonstrating? So you have to find the tips of your biological fingers with your third thumb. And what you're seeing here is performance in a group of participants performing the task for the very first time. And they can do it pretty much as soon as they begin, but with just 5 minutes of practice, they are doubling their performance. So they're picking up this skill very quickly. Here is an adapted version of the task before and after 5 days of training to use the thumb functionally in everyday tasks. And what you can see here is that people get much better, not just while being able to monitor the thumb visually, but also while being blindfolded, so they are able to figure out the relative position of the thumb relative to the biological fingers in motion, which is what I would call a sense of proprioception. The key for the research I'll show you next is training to use the thumb. And what was really important for us is that people use it not just in the lab, but also at home. So in our studies, we actually give people the thumb to take home with them. They have to do some training that we prescribe, but we also encourage them to use the thumb as much as they like in their daily lives. Here's a task that we don't use using training. We use before and after training, so participants don't get familiar with it. And we use that to understand what people actually learn when they're training. So this is what we called a collaboration task. You have to pick up these slippery discs between your third thumb and biological thumb, and it's much harder than Julianne makes it seem in this video. And we run this task under 3 different conditions, just before and after training. Just as a new task that people haven't trained with before. Same again, but using your heels instead of your toes to control the thumb, which is something you have not trained with. And same again with the toes, but using your left hand as an effector. And we want to see how much the training is tied to the actual features of the training compared to the knowledge of using another body part. And what we find is that participants show significant gains pretty much equally across all these conditions, meaning participants are not just learning to use the thumb as we've instructed them in the training, they are learning more than what they've trained for. And it's interesting to ask how this unfolds in the brain. So in this study, we're asking participants to control the third thumb while we're scanning their brains. And the question we're trying to understand is, for the brain, is the thumb merely the sum of its biological parts, which is I'm using my toes in order to actuate the thumb, and there's some sensory information that I can sense on my hand while the thumb is moving. So here we're going to look at primary motor cortex hand area. So this is the part of the brain that normally controls our hands. And we're going to study 2 groups here. One group minimally trained with the thumb just for a couple of hours so that we can be sure that they can do a good job controlling the thumb in the scanner. And we want to see how much the brain is activated when the participants are moving their biological thumb. We see nice positive activity. This is good for this brain area. But when they're just moving their toes or when they're just sensing feedback coming from the thumb, this brain area is not impressed. It doesn't care about toes. It doesn't really care too much about some other sensory information that is not relevant for motor control. And it's definitely not excited when we're using the third thumb. Can we change that with training? So here we're looking at a group that is trained for 9 days to use the thumb functionally every day. And what we see for this group is now when they're using the thumb, the brain is showing nice, strong activity, not as high as when they're moving their biological fingers, but it's definitely paying attention to the motor signals relating to controlling of the thumb. And it's also showing some interest in the sensory information that links the sensation to the movement. So we see the brain growing this activity that is related to thumb function in the area that normally controls the hand. We can dig a bit deeper into this. Now we're going to look at the somatosensory, the input part of the brain. So to activate that part of the brain, we need to stimulate the fingers. And here we're providing these light vibrations on the tip of each and every one of the biological fingers. And we're also providing stimulation at the top of the third thumb. Now, mind you, the thumb is not sensorized. So any input that we are placing mechanically would just diffuse mechanically, passively, through the thumb into the handpiece. And we also have an actuator on the palm underneath the handpiece. And what you're seeing here is this really classical hand representation in somatosensory cortex for each of the biological fingers. We're asking where do we have more activity relating to this finger compared to all the others. So here we have the thumb, index, middle, ring, and pinky. And now we want to ask, what about the third thumb? And this is at baseline, before we're training participants too much. And we do the same trick. So we're asking, where do we have activity associated with the tip of the thumb above and beyond what we can find on the palm? And this is the orange line that you see here. It is quite diffuse. It's kind of taking over the whole hand area, and it's not very high. So there's kind of some information coming from the fingers, from the third thumb to the fingers area. And what we want to ask next is how similar is the activity pattern underlying this activation between the third thumb and the biological fingers. So what we're looking at here is how distant or distinct the activity pattern for the third thumb to the biological fingers. And what we see is that the distance is greatest for D1 and D2, so the thumb and the index, and lower for D4 and D5, the topographic neighbors of the third thumb. This is before training. How does using the thumb meaningfully over a period of 7 days impact its representation? What we see is the distances are being dropped here across the entire hand. So for all the fingers now, the representation in somatosensory cortex of the third thumb becomes more finger-like, more similar to that of the biological fingers of the hand. So for the somatosensory hand area, the thumb is now being related more like a biological finger. And what was really nice in this study is that we found that those people that showed greater neural embedding of the thumb into their biological finger representation were also those participants that told us that they can feel touch coming through the thumb more clearly. So they had a stronger experience of somatosensory embodiment towards the thumb. Last study I'll share with you today. We're going to shift the focus from how using the thumb changes the representation of the thumb to how using the thumb changes the representation of our own biological body. So for this study, participants were training to use the thumb for 5 days, but before and after this training, we scanned them when they were not wearing the thumb at all. And we were only interested in the motor representation of the 5 fingers. So we're back to the primary motor cortex hand area, and we're back to representational similarity analysis. For each of the fingers, we want to understand how it is represented relative to the other fingers, so thumb, index, middle ring, and pinky. And it's hard to see here, but we're actually showing you here the representation before and after 5 days of training with the left hand. And the reason it's hard to see is because if you don't do anything to the hand, the representation is very stable. The left hand was our control hand that we did not augment. And if you remember from my amputee study from the beginning of the talk today, hand representation is remarkably stable, even under very extreme circumstances. And you can see here the statistics, the distances between the fingers being very similar before and after the training. What about the hand that we've augmented? So this is the right hand. And now you can see there's actually 2 sets of representation here. The washed out is baseline, and the colored is after training. And you can see these very subtle, very small shifts in the relative relationships between the fingers, such that the representation of the fingers is shifting, maybe slightly collapsing towards each other, so that we have a bit less information about each of the biological fingers relative to each other. And I think this is such an important result, because even though we are not doing anything explicit to the biological body, by inviting people to use this technology in their daily circumstances, we're actually asking them to change the way they interact with the environment, change the way they incorporate their own body. And these subtle changes in their natural repertoire is going to trigger very abrupt changes to the way the brain relates and represents the body. So with that in mind, I'll ask Danny to wrap up.
All right. Cool. I'm going to wrap us up now. So we started with three assumptions. That closer to the body is better for the brain, that there is a normal body to design for, and that we can design for the body without changing the brain. And what we've seen, both through science and design, is that none of these quite hold. There isn't one correct way to interface with the body. There isn't one normal body to design for, and we can't change the body without changing the brain too. Brain resources devoted to the body can be used very effectively, and placing technologies close to the body can support that. But it's not the only way. The brain is adaptable and can learn new relationships and can make sense of new ways of controlling movement. We often design as if there's a normal body, but there isn't. Bodies vary in structure, ability, and experience, and that variation isn't the exception, it's the baseline. So designing for only kind of an average or able body means excluding people from the start. And what we've seen through this work is that when you design for variation, you don't just support more people, you create better interactions overall. And finally, we assume we can design for the body without affecting the brain. And this is what we've shown when reflecting on brain changes after amputation. But that's not what we see in our collaborative work with augmentation. Across multiple studies, we see that when people use augmentation, the brain begins to adapt. Body representation shift, new patterns emerge, and importantly, this doesn't require perfect biological matching. The brain changes because the body is being used differently. And this is what distinguishes augmentation from restoration. The brain responds to meaningful changes in how we use our body, and we don't see that with loss. So every time we design something new for the body, we are also shaping how it's represented in the brain. We've shown you the body isn't fixed, that the brain adapts and there's no normal. So maybe the shift isn't about fixing bodies, but about rethinking how we design with them. By normalizing difference, we unlock what's possible in how we design and how we live with technology in the future. This work has only been possible through very deep collaboration between design, neuroscience, and lived experience. A very special thank you to all our incredible lab members and collaborators, past and present. There is far too many to name individually, but please check out their published work. And of course, our funders that made this work possible. Thank you very, very much for having us. It has been an absolute honor to present here, especially with both of us, and thank you very much for listening. It's back here. Thank you.
What an amazing presentation. So fascinating. Thank you so much. Before we get started with the Q&A, I would like you to go, if those of you that have questions, to Slido. And you could go to programs.cki.org and click on the top right corner. There is a globe, and then you can ask questions. So I have the first question, because we're focusing on building the future together. You've done an amazing collaboration, a rare collaboration, a neuroscientist and a designer. So I wanted to ask you, how did that story happen?
Yeah, well, so as I mentioned, I designed the first version of the third thumb, which kind of looks similar to this, but not quite as functional, during my master's degree at the Royal College of Art in London. And it went kind of viral after I graduated, and kind of got this, lots of hits on this video. And Tamara and her student Paulina saw it and actually reached out, and they were at UCL at the time. And they were like, "You want to come in and show us your third thumb?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." And I'll let Tamara complete the other end of the story.
Yeah, so from our side, we just won this big ERC grant to work on augmentation for the first time. And we were shopping for an augmentation technology, which sounds as bonkers as it was. Where do you find it? And we were, talking to a lot of engineers that were interested in this concept and how to develop it. But for us as neuroscientists, with all, and we do have due respect to the technology, it needs to work in a really versatile, interesting, robust way that people can trust it and use it at home. And nothing was close to that because the technology is so emerging. And then there's this YouTube video that is forwarded to me. And I told my student, if this is half as good, and it was just as good, but if it's half as good as how it looks like in the video, you hire that person.
That's amazing. Okay, I'll ask the next one. Yeah. We have a lot of questions coming in from Slido, but you can still slide your into Slido too. I'm going to go with Mina's question that is highly voted, and we'll go to the other highly voted as well in a second, that says, diversifying a body is obviously amazing. And they're curious about what metaphors you are using when you're touching on this boundary between human and technology. We saw some tentacles, we saw some multi-species kind of design thing, but what other metaphors are you playing around when you're designing these other type of prosthetics that are not just the canonical, here's a biomimetic hand? Because you even said we can do more than biomimetics.
I mean,
This is yours, my darling.
what kind of metaphors? I mean, just anything that takes inspiration, really. We did a lot of initial, so this is the work with Kelly. We did a lot of the initial design consultations like with her, like with a lot of most of the prosthetics were built with her and my collaborator Sophie. And the Vine just came out of like a design session with Kelly. She's really into like aliens and we started, as you can see from the second one, we leaned into the kind of tentacle, but this first one we were like, we want it to be kind of moving like a tentacle, but we don't want it to be a tentacle. And so we decided to kind of make it really like floral as well. But yeah, I don't think any kind of firm metaphors kind of base it around. It's kind of all inspiration, and I think all inspiration from anything really, and especially different materials as well. Staying kind of really inspired by new materials coming out, especially with 3D printing. I love kind of brand new 3D printing materials that I can get my hands on and experiment with to kind of keep the technology moving forward.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much for the keynote. It's been excellent. So I'm going as well to Slido, and there is a question that says, have any barriers ever appear due to the uncanny valley effects associated with augmented prosthetics?
Sorry, I didn't get.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Have any barriers ever appeared due to the uncanny valley effect?
Barriers.
Barriers ever appear from the uncanny valley?
Uncanny valley effect
Uncanny valley of this?
associated. Oh, sorry. Now I'm with augmented prosthetics. Yes.
Okay, there's a lot going on with that question. The uncanny, I don't think this kind of gets uncanny valley at all. I think that, I've made very specific design decisions to not have it impact, that kind of effect. So that's, color and the fact that, it's extra. I don't think I get kind of uncanny valley.
Control.
Yeah, and the control, that's quite invisible though.
So we have a fun question from the audience. It seems that Dani has used the third thumb more than anybody else. Have we studied her brain?
Well, because they didn't test me before I started using it.
We don't have a baseline.
I can confirm she has a weird brain.
Yeah, you feel really naked when the neuroscientists are all going, oh, this makes sense looking at my brain. I'm like, why? What do you mean? It's like the hand area is very defined. I'm like, oh.
There's a good follow-up maybe on that, but not specifically to Dani. But have you considered doing studies on the more intimate side of touch? So you've done a lot of like the performance-based touch. I'm grasping, I'm moving things around, I'm doing all these pegboard tasks and so forth. But what about intimate touch? How's the skin touching the third thumb on another person? That's sort of like the other effective, some folks call it here, side of touch.
We did not.
No. So intimate in terms of like on the self or with another?
I think all of those, yeah.
Okay.
This audience is like all of those.
Be careful about this question. You see where it's leading.
I'm
Give Dani ideas.
All right, guys. So I'll talk about like touch on the wearer's hand. So the base. Tamar kind of touched on it a little bit with in terms of like interacting with the end of the thumb. There's no artificial feedback. We have studied artificial feedback and done studies with that, but this kind of the main design doesn't. But it does run materially right onto the base of the hand, and then the base of the thumb actually bends kind of into the hand as well. So you are getting kind of a lot of mechanical kind of feedback onto the hand. So it does feel like I can definitely close my eyes and like if someone kind of touches the end of the thumb, I can feel that, which is weird to kind of explain. People don't believe it that I can kind of feel the difference between different textures, but I can. So there is
we've done research to show that
yes,
anyone
and we've done and we've also done research to back that up. And
Definitely need to get her Andor scanner.
And then in terms of touching others, no, we haven't studied that.
So this is not coming from Slido, but it's another question that I have is, so what can we learn as a community from your excellent collaboration, right? You have a multidisciplinary approach. The keynote was excellent because, of course, you put both sides. So what can we, all of us, learn from that collaboration?
For me, my main frustration, if I'm allowed to bitch, is the disciplinary silos We are, a cognitive neuroscience department in the medical school, and our access to engineering is very limited. Design is not even mentioned, it's not even a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And it's really down to individual people to fight against these boundaries and say, but we want to work together. And in terms of funding, in terms of programs, there's nothing to back us up. It's a constant fight, but I think every member in our lab comes from a different discipline, and they all feel very strongly how much bigger the sum is from the parts, and they would go through this extra effort to learn and understand each other's jargons and disciplines to make the most out of each other.
Yeah. Absolutely, and like, I mean, being a designer, when I first started, being the kind of only designer in a lab of neuroscientists, and now we've evolved into such a multidisciplinary lab. But yeah, a lot of the science went over my head, and just trying to kind of not take that to heart. And then it wasn't until I did a presentation to the neuroscientists about the workflow from 3D scanning to 3D modeling to 3D printing, and they were all just like, what? And I was like, okay, yeah, we're all bringing different things to the table. So so that's been fantastic. But yeah, again, echoing what Tamar said, it's been a bit of a struggle. I've never been able to be technically called a designer even. It's always a senior technical specialist or something, So yeah, no, it's kind of, Tamar has been, absolutely fighting for, my place in the lab, and it has been a constant battle, but I think the work is worth it.
We have another question from the audience. Given the connections of your research and design, oh wow, it just moved with the votes. How do you relate to the work of human-computer interaction, and has this field been useful to you in the work that you're doing?
So this is something that Danny brought to the lab. I wasn't even I wasn't aware. So yeah, like Danny, so in journal clubs we try to bring up different disciplines, and Danny gave us a tutorial about human-computer interaction and all the hard discipline and knowledge that comes behind it, which is so incredibly relevant for us, and we've been very thirsty to learn more and participate more in this discipline, which ties up so many loose ends for us. But again, going back to the problem that if you're training as a neuroscientist or if you're training as a biologist, you'll never be exposed to the amazing work that is being done here.
Yeah. Exactly. Well put. And it's just, I guess, kind of, it's slightly more kind of scientific version of designing with humans. When I do product design, it's more, it's a lot of vibes and not as much kind of really deep analysis. So it's very inspirational.
We have like a million questions going on, and we have time for only one more. I'm so sorry. So one that is, I feel like there's a couple that just say, how can we get our hands on it? And there's even one very specifically and highly voted right now that says, are the files available? Can I 3D print it? Can I build it? Can I use it tomorrow? I'm a musician. I want to learn how to play the bass, the guitar. There's a lot of questions.
I know. I'm working hard on it, okay? It's still just me that builds them all. So so at the moment it's just a lab research tool. As you can see, stretched pretty thin across all the amazing research that we do. And because of those students, I won't be, I don't release the files just so that they can kind of have access to it first. I understand it being 3D printed that it's so tempting to 3D print it yourself. But I'm watch this space. I'm working hard on it.
Go replicate it.
That would be fun. Tamar and Danny, thank you so much for a wonderful keynote. Super inspirational.
Thank you.
And Pedro and Pablo, thank you so much for joining me. And now, please help me welcome the president of the ACM, Yanis Yodinis.
I'm not sure what I can say to follow up after this amazing keynote. I broke my glasses a couple of hours before I came here, so this is 2 prescriptions ago. and I feel my brain adapting these past 2 days. And now I can relate. I can talk to you afterwards. So this is closing. ACM Future goes hand in hand with SECAI and CAI Future. This is Association for Computing Machinery, but computing is or should be for the human, by the human, with the human. And your SIG, this flagship conference, is leading the way in so many ways. And as computing runs the world, ACM and our community society needs this community even more. So I feel lucky that I have been coming to CAI for 4 years, getting to know a lot of you, and I'll keep coming even after June 30th. I'll just give you some glimpses of different work that is happening in different boards in ACM, and you can see immediately the relationship with your community. Many of members of your community are participating in these boards and task forces and so on. But in general, we need your help, we need your participation and contribution. I talked about the responsible use of AI within ACM, and there are members of your community that are participating in this. And I've even had a lot of comments about it, as you can imagine. But let me go to another task force, the youthification. Yesterday was this discussion about bringing in new blood to service at CAI and SECAI. This is true in general for the community. Societies and associations don't make sense to the young generation, and we need to see what is the value proposition for the young people and the young professionals coming in, students and so on. Again, members of your community are part of that task force, very young members, and the more that come into service, the better. Global Engagement is a new board that has been brought in, and Isha is leading the Committee for Africa, and you're going in 2 years to Africa. The first flagship conference among the flagship conference of the six. Going there is a very huge signal, and again, in some sense, in any sense, you are a pioneer. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's a concept that is under attack in a bunch of parts of the world, but no ACM continues to use the term, has not changed the term, and will follow our principles and continue all our activities to serve everyone. Technology policy, our policymakers have to understand our technologies and not say, I shouldn't say stupid, not say incorrect things or inaccurate things about it or come up with policies. ACM has a huge role to play, and again, the interaction with humans is key of how we use AI, what about quantum and so on. And CLEAR is a multi-society effort to clear out our community from unethical behavior, scientific and publication behavior. Unfortunately, as our community grows, as the use of AI grows, collusion rings and other unethical behaviors increase, and your participation, your understanding of human thinking and human behavior will help us to address both in educating the community and so on. And ACM leads IEEE, AAAI, USENIX, SIAM, Informatics Europe, CRA. ACM is leading, and your knowledge and understanding is very helpful. This continuation is all about trust. And this is, I've shown sometimes this picture before. This is the picture I found on the web that captures trust in the most intense way. And the lower guy, the way he has shaped his body, it's like an A. And the way the middle lady curves her body is like a C. And then the top guy, you know, it's ACM. I am SECAI now, I am CAI, but I am ACM. You be too. Go and vote in the general ACM elections. It's very important. We have amazing candidates. next year another president will be here on this podium. Go and vote and express who you want to be here. Thank you very much.
So, hello again. I'm Nuria Oliver from Ellis Alicante.
I'm Ayman from MBZ UAI, soon Northeastern.
And we are just here for closing the conference. So, the first topic that we wanted to discuss is not
The
coming,
not working clickers.
which is very appropriate for the content of the next
You
slide.
know what's coming up. The audience knows what's coming up. I don't know if the booth can change the slide for us, maybe.
Hello?
Nope. Okay. Well, we'll just talk about it. There we go.
There we go. We missed.
So you heard about it. You saw the email. We fought very hard. We did everything we could, and we miss him. But I was curious though, why a Catalan donkey, Nuria?
Yeah, so the plushie for this year's Sky is a Catalan donkey. Why? First of all, because it's an endangered species, and we wanted to bring visibility to that. And secondly, because the Catalan donkey represents some of the traits that are associated with the people from Catalonia. It's intelligent, it's perseverant, it's resilient.
It's very hardworking. It's like it embodies everything that's Catalonia and Barcelona and the Kai community. And why are they laughing?
I don't know. Why are you laughing?
What's it?
Oh my God.
Oh, wait.
What is this?
Who's that?
Who are you?
I am Quigmo. I am Chimo's uncle. And I say to you, we're sorry we couldn't see you here, but please come and find us in Pittsburgh next year, where my little cousin will be there to meet you all.
Wow, thank you, Quigmo.
Thank you, Quigmo. How did he get in? There's a wait list.
I have no idea.
Okay. All right. Well, we'd like to give some thanks to our sponsors.
Starting with our hero sponsor, thank you, Google.
Champion sponsors Adobe,
Apple,
Meta,
Microsoft,
Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence,
Toyota Research Institute,
and Autodesk.
as a contributing sponsor, together with ACM SIGCHI.
Aside from the sponsors, we couldn't do this without the organizing committee. Please stand up if you're in the OC. There should be about 100 of you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
And of the organizing, okay, sit down. I've got to close this out. Of the organizing committee, the pubs chairs worked so hard, thousands and thousands of papers, thousands and thousands of human hours at work, getting everybody through taps, resetting taps, putting them back through taps again, and then rinse and repeat.
Starting the cycle.
So pubs chairs, we want you to thank up and also get a big ovation.
And of course, this also, the experience this week wouldn't have been possible without our over 200 student volunteers. So please stand up. Video?
Wait a sec. Oh, yeah, this is video. I think this
You
is
should
video.
say it, yeah. So now if we could please play the video.
Little summary of the week. And we couldn't have a Kai without all of you, so thank you.
Thank you all. Wait, thank you.
Now please welcome the president of the SIG Chi Steering Committee, or the Chi Steering Committee.
Aaron Quigley.
I think on all of your behalf, I would just like to thank again the organizers of 26, our two general chairs. Thank you very much for all the work that you've done. Please give them a round of applause. I think what you've done here and what we've seen here has definitely lifted our sights, lifted our aspirations, and made us think differently about what computer-human interaction is and where it has a place in the world. And in this regard, I've brought you some gifts from Canberra. This only looks like a bottle of wine. However, it's the only wine in the world that's made by a Nobel laureate. So it is from the hands of a Nobel Prize winner to both of you to say thank you for the conference that you've organized, and thank you on all of our behalves for the great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. So you drink it, you become very
exactly.
wise. Thank you.
Introducing your Chi 2027 General Chairs, Amy Ogan and Anand Day.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are looking forward so much to welcoming you to the beautiful and friendly city of Pittsburgh next year. From our video and our logo, you may have noticed our pop art color scheme created by our awesome design chairs. While Barcelona has their luminary in Gaudi, we have Pittsburgh native artist and CMU alumni Andy Warhol, who inspired our visual design. There we go. My name is Amy Ogan. I'm a professor at the Human-Computer Interaction Institute at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, and I'm one of our general chairs for 2027.
And I'm Anand Day. I'm the Dean of the Information School at the University of Washington in Seattle, and I'm the other general co-chair. And working with us, we have two wonderful assistants, Yu Lin and Sharon Amoy. Chi 2027 will be held at the beautiful David L. Lawrence Convention Center, a wonderful facility in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh. It has a series of outdoor spaces with recreation trails, a unique water fountain, and a lot of rooftop social spaces and gardens. This includes a garden on the rooftop that grows hops, where they brew their own beer, and I hope you all get to taste that when you come to Pittsburgh next year. It was the first fully sustainable convention center in the world and is a LEED Gold certified. All the bathrooms are wheelchair accessible. There are dedicated gender-neutral bathrooms, desensitization spaces, and spaces for nursing mothers. The convention center also offers sensory kits with noise-canceling headphones, fidget tools, and other support tools. And the catering team can accommodate a wide variety of food allergies, and any leftover food goes directly to the local food bank. The convention center is there to help ensure that we have an inclusive event for all of us. CHI is returning to Pittsburgh. It was last held there in 1999. I attended CHI 1999 as a student, and I was one of about 2,300 attendees. Pittsburgh came to prominence in the industrial area, providing steel enabling growth and development for the rest of the United States. Pittsburgh is a really amazing city. I lived there for 15 years and I loved it. It's a welcoming, it's a safe, it's a friendly city. It's a unique part of the world, being the largest city in the area of Appalachia. It's a center for technology and education, and yes, it houses many, many, many bridges. And Pittsburgh is a wonderful city for food and drink. It has many award-winning restaurants listed in the New York Times Top 50, James Beard winners, and the rest goes on. So please, welcome to Pittsburgh.
All right. So, what will you see when you come to join us? First of all, we wanted to note that we're in a time where no matter where the conference is being held, there are challenges with getting visas or getting access to entry or to exit from some countries. And so one of the most important things that we're doing is to work to issue visa letters much earlier in the CHI timeline to allow time for all attendees to get their visa appointments and their approvals. We've also yes, we're working hard to make that happen for you. We also attended a very lively discussion on Wednesday about the proposed new reviewing process for papers. Feedback from that session is being deeply considered for implementation. So please stay tuned for more details there. CHI in Pittsburgh will be 5 days long, similar to this year's event. A reminder, the CHI Steering Committee approved this new format for a 3-year trial period, and so we'll be continuing with many aspects of that program next year. Pittsburgh will be year 2 of the new format, but there was also a very strongly attended session yesterday afternoon on suggestions, complaints, feedback, and approvals for this new format. And so we will also be taking all of that into account, while of course we will remain with the papers, posters, interactive demos, panels, workshops, meetups, student mentoring, and all of the great aspects of CHI that you have come to know and love. In addition, our fantastic conference center has space for everyone. We've got 43 parallel rooms with 140 to 250 seats each. So we will make sure that you're able to get into your session of choice. We've got 6,600. Everyone can join us. It's an inclusive venue. We've got 6,600 seats for plenaries. We've got a very large and beautiful space for you to enjoy, and many more rooms for other functions. So we'll make sure that we take all of the feedback from this year's format and conference into account, and that we are working to make the session smooth running next year. And now we'd like to bring up our technical program chairs for 2027, Rosta Farzan and Sven Meyer, to tell us a little bit more.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Sven Meyer, and I'm a professor at the TU Dortmund University.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Rosta Farzan. I am a professor and associate dean at the School of Computing and Information at the University of Pittsburgh, and we are joined by our assistants, Paras and Chris. So the website is up, and
And of course, we already heard from our lovely general chairs, there's questions about the format. We'll need to discuss this. And then, of course, we also had a reviewing session, how the review might change in the future. And we're also processing this feature and all of your feedback right now. So it gave us a bit of time, but you already know when Kai is. So that's great. But now the real important questions for all of you: when is your next paper needs to be ready for submission? And the Kai 2027 full paper deadline will be Thursday, September 10th.
We are looking forward to seeing all of your papers and all of your reviews and all of you in Pittsburgh.
All right. We would now like to invite everybody on our amazing organizing committee for 2027 to come up to the stage. We are all welcome to join us here, and we're excited to see all of you in Pittsburgh, the city of bridges. We're looking forward to bridging differences, bridging cultures, bridging disciplines, and everything else that's going to happen next year in 2027. Thank you, all of our organizing committee.
Thank you for coming to Barcelona for Kai 2026, and we look forward to seeing you in Pittsburgh for Kai 2027. Thank you.